I'm happy to, sir. Let me just go ahead and get YouTube set up and going, and then we'll get started.
All right.
Okay, for the State Shooting Complex Oversight Task Force on April 2nd, Senator Kolb.
Excuse.
Thank you. Mr. Corsi?
Here.
Ron Goldberg for Josh Durrell?
Present.
Judy Legursky?
Present.
Ryan Nesvik?
Here.
Representative Ottman?
Excuse.
Aaron Davidson?
Here.
Dave Glenn?
Here.
Cade Mistis?
Here.
James Schoon?
Excuse.
Co-Chairman Washut?
Here.
Co-Chairman Hicks?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. What I'd like to do today, folks, is you start with that strike and underline version. I think Karen's going to post that for us. It'll be up on the screen. It'll include the edits and comments, and we'll just work through the document from top to bottom. Accept what we want to accept, reject what we want to reject. And the goal is at the end of the discussion that we have an RFP we're comfortable putting out by next Monday. Karen, can you put up the strike comment page? All right, so we begin with the preamble. Representative Ottman had questions about the world-class terminology. Do we want to include a definition for that, or do we just want to leave it out and let people presume what they want to presume that world-class means?
I think world class is fairly self-descriptive.
Any other comments? All right, so let's just leave world class as is. The last line, I think we have a comment down there from me about contacting individual task force members. I think someone else had raised a process that in other RFPs, there's a prohibition for applicants to contact individual decision makers and get individual guidance, that has to be something more formalized. Dave, was that your comment?
Mr. Chairman, yes, and I think that was answered by Senator Hicks in the last meeting, that this is a little different type of RFP. Having said that, I do think that we need some consistency in how people reach out and who they reach out to. It may be a suggestion that if they reach out to the chairs, so you all are consistently giving a consistent answer to those.
Other thoughts?
I would actually like to see it a little bit more formalized, where they contact, either LSO or one of the chairmen, and then the question gets posted somewhere and the answer gets posted somewhere, so that everyone's seeing the same questions and answers. We're not giving them some insight on, hey, here's how I'm going to vote on these things or whatever. And it takes any local feeling out of it, and they're getting the same answers from the same group of people.
I think that's a good idea, Cade, that we absolutely just post those questions so all the members of the task force can see those. And then however you guys, if you want me and Art to respond to those, or everybody weighs in, but I do think that any questions should be not necessarily to a task force member. Interested applicants are encouraged to contact the task force, AKA post your comments or questions, or post your questions here. And then when we respond to those, whoever we is, everybody sees it. So other potential project proponents, members of the task force, The question is did the entire task force want to review those questions before we answer them, or do you want the chairs to do it? But I do agree that first, they should be posted on the website, and second, that the answers to those questions should be posted, because you may end up with proponents with the exact same question.
And I think the chairs can answer them unless there's something that you guys want to dig deeper, like if we happen to get questions on the disciplines or more details on some of the things we've added to, that you could reach out to us offline and then post your answers.
I also think we need to have a timeline on that, so that, maybe they have the RFP for a couple of weeks. And then if they have any questions, they post those. So it's not an ongoing thing all the way through June where we get questions popping up continuously. That's kind of hold their toes to the fire and say, here's 2 weeks, read through the RFP. If you have questions, now is the time to ask the questions. Then we can respond to those at the outset, rather than getting a question asked, the end of May, and we offer an answer, and that disrupts what other people were assuming in their 2 months of work up till that point. So what do you think of that, having a couple of weeks for people to consider the RFP and ask questions?
I think a timeline makes total sense. 2 weeks may be a bit restrictive, however. Maybe give them 3, because everybody is going to start getting into details and go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do here?
Yeah, I agree with that, Judy, that once they start digging in there, maybe what we need is 2 different timelines, initial one and then another one for subsequent questions within that time frame. So if we did one, say sometime around the 3rd week or 4th week in April, and then one in mid-May, what do you think of that, Art?
Yeah, the only risk I think would be that if something came up in mid-May and we give an answer that's different than what folks were thinking they were working on, then now they've only got a couple weeks to adapt to that new answer that just came out.
Yeah, the risk is that if we don't answer a question, then they're going to answer. They're not, you know what I mean? If there is a question and we don't answer it, then they may go off on the rails too. So at least maybe you move that up, 2-week increments. But I think we need to give them a second shot at their second period for questions as they get closer.
All right, so let's look at 2 weeks. We'll give them 2 weeks for initial questions, and then 4 weeks we'll take a final batch of questions. How's that? You get thumbs up if that works for everybody? All right. So 2 weeks we'll take the first round of questions. We'll have the questions posted. If anybody on the task force has suggestions as to the answer, feel free to offer those. Otherwise, the co-chairman will do our best to answer those questions. Okay. Rolling down, time frame and process. April 8th, still good for putting our RFP out, assuming we get through it today. Then due on the 5 p.m. on June 3rd. We'll add the email address and a mailing address for the LSO there under B. Feel free to shout out if there's any concerns on any of these things as we move down. C, task force members to interview, review, rank them by our own subjective evaluation of each total package by the 10th of June. Then LSO will summarize the rankings. We'll have a meeting between the 12th and 14th of June. Task force can eliminate any applicant at that point. Then we have Representative Ottman's comment about, for this process to be fair, applicants in the task force include a formal grading criteria. I thought we discussed that last week. Their
So,
desire, yeah,
Sharon, can
Yeah.
we scroll that document down as we go on the screen?
sure. So can you not see C at this point? I can see C.
Yeah, I can now. Yep.
Okay. So like I said, I thought we discussed this last week and the task force was of the opinion not to do some type of grading rubric, which was my preference, but Representative Ottman posted this suggestion that there be a grading criteria. I think their conclusion was last week that don't have time to begin working on something like that at this point. Is that's the consensus? There it is.
Question,
Yeah,
question.
Representative Ottman, welcome.
Hi, thank you. What I guess where my comment was that on C, we say the task force members will review the individual proposals, rank them from highest to lowest, and submit the rankings. If we don't have a grading criteria, how are we supposed to rank them? Maybe I'm just not clear on what you're thinking. So if you could clarify that for me, I'd sure appreciate it. Thank you.
Aaron, would you like to summarize basically how you visualize this ranking taking place?
Let me pull up that document real quick and
Okay.
I can
And can we get that sent back out? Karen, do you have that document?
The ranking?
The document that you're viewing right now is in the email that I sent you last night that has that has the heading housekeeping. But yes, I can go ahead and send that to you again this morning.
The ranking document that was sent out in November?
This is the
Now,
ranking.
if Mr. Davidson has a document, I don't have that.
You want me to send it directly to you? And
That would be great.
prefer it as a Google document, or would you like it as a Word document or a PDF?
It's a matter of preference for you, whatever's easiest. I can go ahead and send it out to the task force in any of the formats.
So the quick recap on that was essentially we break it down into four core elements: the site, accommodating service, the draw, like pulling people in, future success. And then, each one of those we can break down into a couple other, tangible, scoreable metrics. And basically you just go through and, 1 through 5 or however we set that up, and you score it. And when you're done, you add it up, and that gives you a really objective methodology to rank each one, and gives us all a really good set of talking points when we're saying, hey, well, why did you score this, so low or so high? Then we can discuss it and maybe, understand a little bit more about the different proposals based on that discussion.
And if I can
Representative
clarify a
Ottman,
little bit, Aaron, sorry, Chairman, the concept was, I think the difference between the formal grading criteria and Aaron's proposal wasn't that we would go through and say, if you're 3,000 acres, you're a 5. If you're 2,500 acres, you're a 4. If you're 2,000 acres, you're a 3. It's we as a committee have 1 through 5, each of us to grade different proposals on. And as we go through the things that are important to the vision of how we see the complex, that's how we score it, rather than a very specific rubric that we have to get down to the how many miles from land to water rights are.
Yeah, I felt like it was at the very end, it was our opinion, but it let us create our opinion on a small thing. For example, on the site, let's say it's like land parcel size. It's like we could say, hey, look, we ranked this one higher than this one because of the land parcel size, or the land topography, or the location value itself. I think another one was flexible present and future suitability, buffer zones, cost to acquire, acquisition likelihood, utility cost, access cost, remaining value to construct. And we could simplify that a little bit. I just put some ideas down there. And so you basically say, hey, here's the site. Here's kind of how I'm going to rank those ideas. And truthfully, I kind of wonder if we wouldn't all have different opinions about, which one's more important. Is the site more important than the draw to the state, like the extra things that they can do while they're here? Which one do we feel is more important? So even allowing us to rank, those categories. But I think it would actually finish. I just did a sample for the site. I bet I could finish that with input from the committee and put an actual like scoring matrix that everybody could see and process together in. I could probably turn that around for the committee in a week, I'll bet.
Yeah, I think that might be very useful to have that turned around, and then we could even share that out with the communities so they would know how we were going to score it. Maybe just in the RFP, we'll say that the scoring system will be released by May 1 or something, and give us a little bit of wiggle room, but they can get working on this, and then we'll provide for them a copy of our scoring system by the 1st of May or something like that. Other thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, is Pepper.
Yes, Representative.
Yes, thank you for that. Because I was very wondering about that, exactly how to do that. And I think for 2 reasons, this will be good. One, it will help us to individually develop our thoughts about, okay, what am I looking at with each one of these? And just to get warmed up for that. And secondly, I believe that in order to organize exactly what we're looking at, are we looking at a facility that will work, or are we looking at, okay, what will be the world-class thing for Wyoming? We're not looking at or at least the way I'm understanding, we're not looking at something that may work because we're desperate, but we're looking at what is it that is going to produce this in this state? Because this really, I was thinking about it this morning, this is our legacy. This is going to be here long after we're gone. So anyway, thank you for that time, and thank you for that clarification. And Aaron, I look forward to that.
Josh, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. I think the only thing I might recommend on this in regards to the RFP and letter C is, fair process is such a relative. I think it would be better stated that just in the name of transparency, this is what this criteria looks like. I don't know how you would determine what's fair, what's not fair, but I think the intent here is to be transparent.
I agree. So we probably strike that language for this to be a fair process. The applicants task force include a formal grading criteria. Maybe just something that says the grading scheme will be provided to applicants no later than May 1st or something like that. That work for everybody?
Yep.
Do you have that language, Karen, kind of a conceptual?
Yes, sir, I can go ahead and get something put together based upon your comments.
All right, let's scroll down
Now,
then to anything
but
further on C.
Before we leave C,
Yeah,
do you want it to have a separate date from the Q&A, or would you rather have the metric coincide with the release of one of the 2 Q&A periods, either the mid-May or the 3rd week of April?
I think we want it to come out before the Q&A period so that if they have questions about the grading, we can answer those questions as well.
Okay. So with the first Q&A period ending the the third, fourth week of April, do we want to go ahead and release the Q&A prior to, the metric prior to that first Q&A period?
Yeah, I'd like to have it out at least a week ahead before that Q&A closes. And then, as soon as Aaron cranks that out, we can take a look at it, finalize it, and but I'd like them to have at least a week with the grading criteria before that first comment period or question period closes.
Okay, then I'll make the adjustment to show that it'll probably close around the 15th of April. We'll have that metric out there on the 15th so that you would have roughly the 22nd, somewhere in that time frame for when the first Q&A finishes, assuming that everything goes out on the 8th.
Aaron, does that work for you?
Yeah.
All right, anything further on C? All right, let's scroll down, Karen, to D. Anything on D? Has everybody blocked out some time so as many of us as possible can participate in proposals? 24th to 28th? Okay. Hearing
I
nothing.
think I had mentioned to you, Mr. Vice Chairman, that I was unavailable on the 28th with a long-standing commitment.
Okay, we'll do our best to get them done on the 24th, 25th, and 26th.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Karen, can you make note of that? So as we schedule these presentations, we try to do them on the front end of that time frame.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything further on D? E, on E. Hearing nothing on E. F? Anything on F?
It doesn't matter if it's in E or F, but I just think it would be, for the sake of clarification, like site visits will be scheduled with only the selected applicants or something like that, just so people are clear that that's an elimination after E. I know we have
comment?
applicants will be selected for further consideration in E, but I was in government long enough to know that people don't understand always the implications of that.
Yeah. So in E, we say
forward or something like that.
Redundancy is a good thing, Kate. If you say it over and over again, they might actually understand.
So in E, we say that applicants will be selected for further consideration, right?
And maybe you just add on to that, the remaining will be eliminated from consideration.
Okay, Karen, you got that on E?
Yes, sir.
That other applicants not selected will be eliminated at that point. Good. Other comments on E or F? Karen, we want to make sure that these Q&A sessions are listed in the same timeline so that it all flows.
Yes, sir. I will add those. I believe this current document has a table of dates at the end.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure to update that so that we have all of the relevant dates.
Very good. Very good. G. All of us try and plan some time between the 12th and 16th. If you have a date that you absolutely can't meet between the 12th and 16th, please let Karen know and we'll do our best to try and have as many of us as possible meet.
I am most likely going to be in Asia for that duration, but as long as we schedule it in advance, I can plan to be somewhere that I can make that, I can call in for that.
Okay, we'll try and make that as early as possible. We can determine that.
So on that issue, what would help is if you guys can't make a certain date, let us know and we'll pick one day and get that scheduled rather than that whole week to try to tighten that up.
Either that or we could all go to Asia with Kate.
Come on over. The Philippines are beautiful in August.
Senator
For me, the
Cole,
later
welcome.
in the day, the better. Over here, meaning it's morning there versus middle of the night, 2 a.m. But I'll make it work.
All
So
right.
if we don't, Art, if we don't hear back from people in the next week with any specific dates they can't make that week, we'll just get one and get it posted. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah. So send us an email if there's a date that doesn't work and let us know. Senator Cole, welcome.
Oh, well, welcome to you, Representative Washit. I've been here for a while, just getting up to speed. Thanks.
Okay. I only see about 5 pictures on the right-hand side, so you just popped up on my screen. So, okay, moving on to H. After the task force makes its final selection, the task force will make a recommendation to the governor. And I collaborate with
Mr. Chairman.
successful applicants. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't
Right.
get my hand up there quick. So my question there is who's actually going to sponsor the legislation? Is it going to be with the JC or is it going to be with TRW? And the reason I'm asking is should there be a date here? This is no later than, October before the final interim meetings. The task force will have made the final selection and forwarded it to the JC governor and TRW. Is there a need to have a date here is my question.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Well, it says in G there, the task force will meet the week of August and publicly schedule me to make its final selection. And then after the task force makes its final selection of location, we make a recommendation. So I'm assuming that recommendation is going to come right after that selection on that August 16th. And so we could put a date in there, the task force will make its final selection. We'll make a recommendation by such and such to the governor. So, and it gets to, I think, Director Nesvik's point. The Appropriations Committee is going to be meeting in December. That would be the last committee that meets. TRW, I have not looked, but yesterday, I think their last meeting is sometime maybe in October.
It is.
Yeah, and so we could put in there the task force would make its recommendation to the governor by August, whatever it is. If we need a date certain, I thought it was kind of implied, but it may be good to put a fallback date in there by September 15th or something like that as a drop dead date.
Ryan, anything further?
Yeah, I think so. I think and I'm also looking at this as an informational document. People are going to read this and kind of want to know what the timeline is. And if there's a date in there, it kind of holds the task force accountable, but it also lets the public know when it's going to go, when there's going to be an actual recommendation that goes forward.
So in H, we'll put no later than September 15th, the task force will make a recommendation to the governor. How's that work? We can do it sooner if we're ready and do it by the 5th.
Sounds good to me.
Something to that effect. That's just that's a drop dead date that we have to make a final recommendation.
The 15th of September is actually a Sunday. Let's go with the 16th, Karen. September 16th. No later than September 16th, the task force will make a recommendation to the governor.
That's noted.
Thank you. Anything else on H? Going to I. Anything on I?
Mr. Chairman, I put in the bottom of the document something we do when we do RFPs, just saying this is what's required and this is what's authorized. And I know those are words we wouldn't probably want to use. And we may not need it since we're talking about the scoring piece now and sharing that information. But I think it would behoove us to make sure we're really clear on what is required versus what they can build out in the future. So for example, is an education center required right off the bat or not? That's something we need to determine. But I just wanted to throw that out. I don't know where to put it. I don't know what the group thinks, but I just wanted to throw it out.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
We did cover some of that in our recommendations coming up with disciplines, et cetera. And so maybe that's where we could review that of like what we expect this to have when it opens, what it should be built for in the future, what some of those, because everything, $10 million doesn't go as far as you think it does. And so, what does it need to open with versus what the phase capabilities are?
Yeah,
We did
Mr.
not talk
Chairman,
about
I think
lodge.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think it'd be good to get all the way down to Wi-Fi, to those types of things, if we feel that it is required.
Okay, well, let's think about where we might want to put that in this document. We put it toward the end, up here in the front end, we're just talking about the timeline and the process, but I think it would behoove us to have that spelled out with some certainty of what was the, maybe when we ask them for a map that demonstrates that everything can fit on this site, right? Not necessarily that's where the engineers are going to ultimately place everything, but do we at least have a layout that says we think we can put all of this stuff on this piece of land? And at that point say, is there a place for an education center? Is there a place for this and so forth? But where exactly in the document we want to wedge that in? Let's think about that as we go through. All right, Karen, let's scroll down.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Sorry, real quickly on do you see, is that a lot of the bulk of the work after the session? And I don't, maybe I'm splitting hairs. I don't think we need to make anything clear on that. We continue to talk with the applicant that is recommended, I guess, throughout from August to opening, but I don't, am I making any sense of my question? A lot of that work is after the session, right?
I would think so, but this language, I think, gives us the ability to have some ongoing dialogue if we need to. And that way, when we go on the floor to present the proposal and questions come up from the various members, we've had that opportunity to clarify things and so forth. So I think this is permissive language that gives us that room to interact with the successful applicant before, during, or after the session.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would weigh in there, and I kind of agree with Ron on that. I mean, we're just saying this is something to consider, but a lot of this work, once we select a site, there's going to be a lot of work as far as actually follow-up work I envision with this, and so I don't know how detailed you want the RFP to deal with stuff that I foresee is going to be a lot of follow-up work when we actually start laying this thing out. But that's my thoughts.
Representative Altman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. And not to beat a dead horse, but when I'm going down through and grading things and looking at things, I want to be able to see this. And what I'm wondering is if we do not say there's room for expansion, okay, what are you looking at? So is there room? We want this at groundbreaking to have a visitor center, or to have these 5 disciplines be ready to set up. Is is that what we're looking at? Because if I just am real hesitant to look for a site and not know what I'm expecting it to be used for and what it can be used for. So maybe I'm missing a part here that's understood. But just to pick a site that looks good, I'll go back again to some of the government facilities that we have built, i.e. the prison, and to say, oh my goodness, we didn't know that water was going to run in there and incapacitate it. So that's what I'm wondering here, and maybe you all understand that, and I just haven't taken that in yet. But I want to know what we're looking for and what is going to be built on this once the site is there. What are the engineers going to have to look for? Is it, how long is it going to take? Is there something already there? And not leave it up to, well, we'll make it work down the road. With this many applications and good ones, I think that we can be a little bit more detailed. So that your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, I think we want to spell out what are the required components of the phase one, and then what the build out might look like, what other amenities, what other facilities and so forth might be there. But I agree with Cade, 10 million is not going to go all that far. But if we get, sufficient sponsorships and partnerships with the communities, we might be able to do more. But I think we ought to lay out a minimum of what we're hoping phase one looks like. Cade?
Yeah, so this is where I keep kind of going back and forth, because we keep telling the teams we don't want them to design this thing. Then we go back and say, show us exactly where on the land everything's going to go, what the buildings are going to lay out like, down to how, Wi-Fi and HVAC maintenance. Those two messages are conflicting to the groups of people. Like, when later on in here, there's a place where we say we mandate that they have maps of how everything's going to go. And yet we've told everyone, don't hire consultants to design this thing because you're not going to design it. Those things are conflicting in my mind. And I think this is site selection, not design selection. And in my mind anyway, unless I'm mishearing what the goal is, I think
I concur with that. Yeah. Aaron.
I was kind of wondering if we could consider, potentially in this matrix of scoring and assessment is, I don't know that we're really concerned about, well, you have this thing or that thing. I'll bet that Cade wants to make sure that there is an archery range on this thing. I get the sense that 3D archery, and I stuck a stake in the ground the other day and said, there better be some long range shooting there. So, I mean, we're all going to have our own interests in, what's there. But technically, if we think about what our goal is on the committee, I'm not sure that we care what gets accommodated, as long as we have a reasonable assurance and understanding that this creates a successful business plan that will be sustainable into the future, and that, basically selling us as an investor group that this is a good place to put the money, and in the future, can grow and can be better, but at the launch will represent Wyoming in a fashion that we feel comfortable is correct according to our duties and requirements. I mean, maybe they bring a plan that has, shooting facilities that aren't as exciting as we think, but man, when we look at the business plan, it just knocks our socks off. I think if you think about it, the business plan aspect and evaluation is actually where we probably land. And if they want to sketch out like some proposed site stuff, we're going to accommodate this and this and this, and, phase this over here. I agree. You probably don't need to have you don't need to have a consultant to do that. I mean, we kind of sketched out, you need shooting bays that are this big, for these sports, you need about 20, 25 of them. I mean, anybody can grab a map and sketch that out and rough it out just for a proof of concept. I think that's more than enough for a business plan evaluation.
Mr.
Anybody
Chairman,
else? Yeah,
I would say I agree with Aaron. I think the important piece is the 20 to 25, right? That's what we're saying is the minimum of 20 to 25 bays. We know it needs to have Wi-Fi. We don't care how they get Wi-Fi. It just needs Wi-Fi. Those are the things that I think it is good to just be really clear. This is the minimum of what you need on that piece. And you're right, Aaron. You can just build right on that with the business plan after that.
other comments? So I'm not sure I have an answer yet. Do we have a list of things that we want to specify in the RFP that need to be provided for in the phase one? Yeah,
Just real quick, I'm sitting here looking at that scoring criteria, and I kind of wonder if I shouldn't show you guys really quick, a list, and as we're going through your document, maybe pull out a few more at the end of that session. Maybe I could pop this up for like 5 or 10 minutes
okay.
and show you guys just like a few that I had picked out. Maybe we could have a quick brainstorm session, make sure I haven't missed anything. But I kind of feel like if we could get to where we think we're going to score quickly, that would really, kind of go back and forth, or vice versa. Maybe the scoring comes after the evaluation, but I think those get connected.
Can you post that up?
I can share it real quick. I think I can share here, can't I? Yeah, share screen. Does that work?
Yes, we can see it.
I had just took I had the site, I had about 8 or 9 things, and I was just sitting here while we were talking, and I was making it shorter, a little bit simpler. And I was shooting for maybe like 5 items for each one of those categories to try to evaluate. For example, like site suitability would include things like size, topography, buffer zones, access, etc. It's like, do we like the site or not? Location value, does it represent the essence of Wyoming? I mean, there's Wyoming and then there's Wyoming. So which one are we wanting to show here? What do we feel is the flexible present and future suitability? Like based on what the group that I worked with this last week, we looked at some different shooting disciplines and quantities of competitors and size and space. It's like, do we feel like, what's there is going to accommodate us into the future? Remaining value to construct after the cost to acquire. Now that one loops in all the things like, how much does the land cost? What are the utilities are going to cost? Basically what's left to build the actual structures, and and maybe in the business plan, or maybe right there, just a little bit of a feel for, hey, this has a lot of built-in natural, capability that's not going to require a lot of expense pushing dirt. You get down to that business plan and they say, hey, look, we've got $10 million. We're only going to have to spend $2 million of it on roads and, dirt movement. And the rest of this gets spent on, facility stuff. Well, that's great. I mean, we're going to really stretch those dollars. So what's that remaining value to construct kind of accommodates? Well, what's it cost you to get the site before you start building? I debate about this likelihood of acquisition. I know it's come up a lot, but maybe that's a consideration that needs to be in there as well. If we really feel like there's a potential, a proposal could, fall out the bottom, or maybe timeline.
Yeah, I think the timing of acquisitions is important. I mean, if it's not likely, we're not going to go there, but timing is, I think, so timeline of acquisition is very important.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I see we're going to run into in with a couple of potential proposals is timing.
Would there be anything else on the site evaluation that we would really feel like we wanted to try to score? Or
I think if you get the proposals and you look at the detailed information that we've asked for, minimum distances, topography. It's much more prescriptive in the proposal. I think most of that's going to roll right back into site suitability. And I would concur with some of your earlier statements. We don't want to design at this point in time. We just have to have site suitable to design everything.
And it's our opinion. What we're scoring is our opinion based on all the knowledge we've acquired. I'm going to have an opinion that's different than somebody else's. And that's how the scoring works, is it takes all our opinions and weights them appropriately.
Yeah.
What about the wow factor? Does that go into our site? We've used that term many times.
I think that I tried to say it more sophisticated. I said location value, but
Okay.
but that's exactly what I meant. Does it capture the essence of Wyoming?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Accommodating service,
Mr. Co-Chairman?
Representative Oppen.
Yes, thank you. Is there a place in here, Aaron, and you may have it further on down, that the community involvement, like whether or not the committees have community buy-in, like if there's going to be certain lands and stuff like that, is that something that's going to work, or just the support? I know a few of the proposals have great community input and support, but I was just wondering, is that a place, is there a place on this, or is it already on here? Because I think that community input, for so many reasons, for acquisition, for volunteers, for time, for donations, for everything, it's important. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's going to come in under the future success and business plan, right, Aaron?
And
yeah, I think she touched on a few, Chairman. The likelihood of acquisition, the workforce, I think the governance structure and key leadership, business plan, all of those, I think in total represent, community involvement or not.
Yeah.
Good. All right, so let's go up to accommodating service. Aaron, you want to walk us through that piece?
Again, I put these down in the last 10 minutes, so feel free to mature these as you want. Lodging infrastructure, food options. I don't know if we want to treat those separate or if that's just food and lodging, but it seems like lodging infrastructure with hotels and motels, number of beds, campgrounds, hey, we're looking for some numbers. We're also looking for availability. I know, speaking locally, I know Cody's got tons of hotels and stuff, but they don't have tons in July. So, maybe that is something to consider there. Accessibility to accommodations. I don't know if that one has value or not. I mean, I feel like, there's a lot of great places in Wyoming, but some of them are a little too remote. And maybe that's in site suitability, but the site might be great for what we want to do, but the fact that it's separate from our lodging and food, I think is more of an accommodating service category. I also feel like that workforce needs built in here somewhere. This is definitely maybe a spot, but what's that availability for workforce is also consideration. Is there anything else in that category that anybody can think of that would belong there?
Yeah, I didn't think about it, but I heard from some match directors that access to emergency services is one of their requirements for insurance policies on these things. So emergency services and ability to, distance from hospitals, et cetera.
And what about transportation infrastructure, aka airports, roads? And maybe it's not infrastructure, but transportation access.
Yeah, that could airports and rental cars and all that in there.
Yeah.
That almost feels more like it's site than accommodating services. Like access to the site seems like
I separated the evaluation of the actual land from the concept of the access, but like I agree with you that it starts to feel the same. But
You know, I don't know that it matters so much which category we put it in, as long as we have a place to compare sites. But I'm
Eric,
fine with
I
it being-
think on your number 6 there, I think maybe spelling out number 3 with utilities.
So utilities,
give me just a little bit more there. But
so utilities being water, power, those sorts of things, is that a site issue?
Yeah.
It's a side issue.
But we don't even care about the like all we care is they've assessed the cost and that there's something remaining to actually build some structures. So I feel like this remaining value to construct after cost to acquire.
Yep, I think that's in there.
Yeah.
That's going to be your utilities.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, Aaron, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this a little bit. I think, are we going to require something like a clubhouse? Is that something that we're going to say you need to have, or are we just going to put it under, build it if you want to? Is there a minimum thing that we're going to say you need to have under site suitability?
Well, what is your opinion, Dave? What is your opinion?
I think you need something inside.
Okay, so perfect. So you can go through and score, you know, what number 2 down at future success, what are the facilities at launch? And you can say, you know what, because you don't have a clubhouse, I don't think I'm going to rank you the highest. I agree with you. I think we all will have our opinions about what is most important at the.
Except we're not asking them to design it. So
Yeah, and that's where we get to. If I think this next step is once we've assessed the site and we looked at the utility access, all these things, and I think this is going to tease itself out once we get down to 1 or 2 top proposals and stuff. But I just come back. We can't design this thing until we have a site. And we've agreed that it meets all the other potential, accommodations, the draw, the success, all that's there. We're going to have to evaluate what the budget is and then plan that out. But I think we all know, there's going to be a clubhouse, potential retail sales. All of these things are there. It's just, I don't think we can design this at this point in time. I think we have to make sure that that's all built in, that it can happen. But until we know what our final budget is, I'm reluctant to tell somebody you got to have a clubhouse, you have to have this, you have to have that, you have to have this, because they're going to spend all their time trying to design the facility.
but you can say a site suitable for building both indoor and outdoor facilities. Because indoor facilities, those types of constructions are different. They require different grounds versus a big open range. And so I think if you were just specific or not specific, but say that the ideal site will accommodate locations for both indoor and outdoor activities.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. Something to that.
Mr. Chairman, it feels to me like if we're really like a really important evaluation criteria on my part, I'll tell you this right now, is the business plan, which is who's involved, what's the budget look like, how are you going to generate revenue, how are you going to have a surplus or a deficiency in dollars? I don't know how you can get to a functional structural business plan that actually makes sense without having some discussion about, hey, look, we're going to have, at launch, we're planning on having at least this minimum set of facilities. We've estimated, approximately this size and this location. We've estimated approximately this much cost to construct. And, we're going to have this facility that's indoors right now. we've budgeted, $375 a square foot for this metal building construction. Here's some of the risks that we have concerns about, soil stability or whatever. We haven't spent any money on architecture. We haven't spent any money on geotech or soils engineering, but this is roughly what we're anticipating. So this is what we think we're going to have at launch based on, a $10 million capital budget. So I feel like that you can't just show up with a proposal that says, hey, here's a piece of ground, this is going to be great when we're done. Like that's not going to get a lot of love out of me. I want to see the right people involved. I want to see some smart people able to make good financial assessments to know that, the money that we're going to be spending is actually going to go into hands that'll be good stewards, and that they'll be able to stretch it as far as we possibly can and get the most value for Wyoming and for the people that come in. They're going to have to sketch out what they're going to provide. They're going to have to say, this is what we anticipate the budget is going to accommodate when we launch. If you can't do that bare minimum assessment with what we're asking for in this proposal, I don't know how that proposal makes it past my perusal anyways.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Yeah, well said, Aaron. And I go back to Representative Ottman with community involvement. And then, Cade, this is site selection, not design. I think instead of overly prescriptive when there are a lot of unknowns, it's, do you have the right people? Do you have the local leadership? Do you have not only the community involvement, but business? Do you have the workforce? Do you have visitors, tourism bureau, business plan / economic development plan? Now that's these questions about phase 2 or 3 and expansion and economic development. You got to have that core group of collaboration, thinking big with a vision and working together. So.
Is it clear in the RFP to everybody that the proposal will include a description of what the community sees their facility having available at launch? Is that clear that that would be what we would see in our original proposals, or do we need to add something more into the RFP to make sure that each community gives us an at-launch picture of what they are offering?
I think you've hit on a very important point here. I don't think it's that obvious in the RFP. It certainly wouldn't hurt to add that verbiage.
Other thoughts?
I agree.
Yes.
I agree
Sure.
as well.
Okay, Aaron, you want to go on through the rest of your scoring sheet here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So is there anything else on accommodating service? I think thanks for the input on that transportation. I completely missed it. But on the draw, I feel like the activities, one thing that I got from Judy over this last week was competitors, while they're competing, also want things to do while they're waiting. And so there's activities for local, non-competitors or after hours, local activities for non-competitors and after hours. So this could be something in the town, or maybe, it seems like additional shooting activities was a potential consideration to have, to keep people engaged while they're here.
Right. I've seen matches that have like little side shoots that for an extra entry fee, you can have a bowling pin shoot, or you've got some other kinds of stuff going on the side. And it keeps you involved while you're, like say, you're waiting for your match to roll around. You can still be, having some fun and maybe win a few prizes while you're doing those things. But I think it can include both on-site and off-site.
I'll try to word that a little better.
Okay. Other comments on the draw? Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
Tourist attractions. Well, I feel like that's a big part of this, trying to get more people in Wyoming and maybe to try to stay, another night or come a little bit early or bring your family. I think that's an attraction. I think that, and I don't know how we're going to calculate this, but maybe it's something that should be considered in the proposals is, what's the economic impact of Wyoming? That's something we've talked about. Maybe it needs some further discussion about how we actually gauge that. But, the number of people, the number of nights, can we render it down to a dollar value that we think that's worth?
I think that the tourism department can give us that, some background numbers. I mean, you'd be amazed at the way they can track a visitor that goes to Devil's Tower or Yellowstone or, Sinks Canyon, wherever in the state, Flaming Gorge. They'll calculate, how long it takes them to get across Wyoming, how many days they had to spend. And they've got some pretty incredible databases. And I think that's something we need to really have the tourism department folks give us some criteria to look at when we get to start evaluating.
Mr. Chairman, do you think that we could have them actually run a calculation and give us a score or a ranking, maybe?
So I think once we get down to some of those, I've just seen some of their database and they'll show a visitor that showed up and say, went through Cody and Yellowstone and then back out of the state. And they're able to kind of track, how much economic development that was. Same thing if somebody flies into an airport or something and spends 2 or 3 days. And so I think we can ask them to see if they've got anything like that they can supply. I don't know if they specific to this, but I think we need to ask them. I know they couldn't be on here today, but that's a question that we need to pose to them.
They didn't show up. It's the perfect time to assign them the responsibility to make this calculation and score for us.
That was my thoughts.
Yeah. Karen, can you make a note of that?
Yes, sir. I will make sure to assign everything to tourism this afternoon.
Very good. Very good.
Mr.
Aaron,
Chairman,
continue.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just throw out, Aaron, you have so many tabs up. I have a headache about what your life is like.
Oh, you got nothing. That's just one screen. There's 5 different desktops, and I have about 15 tabs on each desktop. This is easy. You got nothing there.
Continue, Aaron.
Okay, so I feel like you look at what's been happening in Wyoming over the last 10 years on the firearm side, and look at some of the really cool companies. I'm not trying to brag here, but just look at Maven, look at Weatherby, and I'm not saying Weatherby's cool. It's a company that's come here to Wyoming. But you got down on the south in Rock Springs, you got like everywhere we have these little pop-up, clusters of, gun companies. And I feel like this thing that we're talking about building actually has a really we haven't discussed it very much, but I think there's a possibility for some bubbling up of a business development around that, maybe specifically in the firearm space. But I mean, obviously we know that lodging and food could be impacted as well, but I feel like this business development around this, aspect could be a big piece of this, and probably, should be something that we're looking at.
I know that Ron and Josh and I have had that discussion because they went to a conference in Kansas City about cluster development, and maybe Ron can chime in here, but there is a great desire for that exact idea, that the development of these businesses that show up in association with one another actually feed each other with people and technologies and shared resources. Ron, are you out there? Can you chime in on
Yep.
that cluster idea?
Yeah, certainly. No, Aaron, you're spot on. I think that belongs in there. I think tried to capture that essence down below in the economic development part of the RFP. But yeah, and I go back to I think that's why at the foundation of all this, what we're discussing is that really strong collaboration and leadership with different aspects of industry, community, mayors, tourism visitor in a community to think big. And you start developing these clusters like you're seeing with Aaron and Cade and the businesses mentioned. Then you open up supply chain manufacturing opportunities. You open up all kinds of opportunities, good wages, good efforts with the donations. You start talking about sponsorships, and so anyway, I'm rambling now, but I wholeheartedly support that draw.
I would
All right.
contend though, that all of that stuff happens organically and without the input of, no offense, the quasi-governmental agencies. If Lander comes out and says, we are going to have a cluster because we have a range here, and here's the 5 businesses that'll move here, it might happen, but it won't happen the way they think it'll happen. I think a lot of us are where we are because of, and Aaron could maybe agree or disagree, but like the gun culture in Cody has kind of spawned from a group of people that started, and it kept going and kept going, and now there's a whole bunch of companies there. I don't think you could have planned that 20 years ago and done it on purpose. Not that it doesn't belong in here, but
I think there's a little bit more to it than this, Cade. But I agree with you. It's going to happen organically, but the local community, the local politic can influence it heavily. We were talking about the impact that a business has on a community, and it's great. Like I think we're like 95 employees today. I think we contribute well over $6 million in wages. A lot of the people that we are hiring we're importing from other states and bringing to Wyoming. And I thought, oh yeah, this is wonderful. This is great. Like, look at everything that we're doing. And I was having a chat with the governor and a couple guys at the one of the trade shows, and they started telling me about all of the challenges that brings, like the cost on the education and school system and what that impact is. And all of a sudden I started realizing that it's not all that easy. And you could very easily have a local group that maybe doesn't want the development and the growth and the change. You could have a we've got a Forward Cody here. You could have an economic development group that is, a great track record of success of recruiting and developing and building, and one community that doesn't even have that, and maybe doesn't even realize that the potential that it has. Like, I feel like there is a piece there that needs discussed, and maybe some communities don't realize the impact they can have on, inviting and providing the opportunity for a business to maybe grow and to become more.
1000% agree. And to me, that's that business friendly community, or we call it the fertile field around here, making sure that that base layer of economic development of local governance is open, that there's business parks, etc., which is to me a different thing than intentionally telling us what clusters you're going to drive. Like, to me, it's the is your community open for business, which is kind of a different hard thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that word potential is kind of I think the key word. I agree with you, Cade.
All right, let's move to future success.
So again, I'm too analytical here, but I feel like if we can't get a good business plan that sells us, like, imagine you're a banker and somebody's wanting to borrow $10 million from you, or get a grant for $10 million. if they can't sell us that they're going to take this and be successful with it and be able to, you know, not come back and say, hey, we need another $1 million to operate this thing a year, you know, 2 years down the road. I think the facilities at launch, I think that we discussed that one already. I think they got to be able to pitch a really efficient spend of the dollars to get us the most bang for the buck. We've talked about this before, the governance structure, like how are they going to put this together, you know, private, public, et cetera. That really needs considered. And I think depending on the business plan and what they're proposing, I think that governance structure will be really important. I also think the key leadership and the resumes and track record of the people that are involved, I think it's really important. I mean, it's a really key part of that business plan, but I think it's really important. If you go down to Cameo, everybody that went down there and met, you know, Walt, I believe was his name. I think we all realized that he was so instrumental in the efficiency of the dollar spend and the creation of that facility and what was actually there. I think we need to realize that the leadership is pretty important and make that part of our evaluation of the group and community.
Okay, I think even though this was a deviation away from the RFP, I think it's been time well spent. I hope the task force members agree that this is beneficial. And as we think about this type of scoring system, now when we return back to the RFP, let's make sure that we've got all the pieces in the RFP that will make this scoring system work. Does that make sense? Okay, Karen, let's go back to the RFP. Okay, so we're at land ownership. Dave, you had some comments there.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I'm looking at those comments. That was what I had brought up earlier, so I think we've covered that. Thank you.
Okay. So as we go ahead, so as we look at land ownership, we talked about the timeline for acquisition. Is that adequately teased out here in the RFP? To everybody's satisfaction?
Scroll down a little bit if you would, please, Karen. There you go.
I have a
So
question.
it talks about letters of interest and support from authorizing entities with proposed timelines for execution. You know, whether they're right-of-ways, leases, private, federal land. They're going to have to tell us that they've got things in place to get back. And maybe we put that instead of say letters of support from potential grantee or authorizing entities with a proposed timeline are highly desirable. We could put in there that they're absolutely required.
Aaron, you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I've seen some of the proposals have some state land that's been discussed, and you know, I've kind of seen a potential conflict coming up where I have a hard time imagining any leasee of state lands wanting to, you know, give up any of their rights that they have in that lease. A lot of these are really integrated into you know, cattle operations, et cetera. And I'm curious, you know, we've suggested that state lands are a quick path to a lower cost option for a site selection. And and I'm not sure that it's without conflict. I don't know if there's any guidance that we can give regarding, the use of state lands, maybe, and how to resolve that, or suggestions for how to, to leverage state lands, perhaps in land swaps or acquisitions. And just I'm kind of curious about offering guidance in that aspect.
Mr. Co-Chairman?
That's why we've actually, if you go down just a little further, we've provided a contact for those proposals that involve state lands. We've had a discussion with the Office of State Lands and Investment. We tried to make a school on these state school ones that we required for. So initially, we just can't go build on these school state lands. They're still going to have to be leased by the state of Wyoming. And under the fiduciary responsibility of the land board, they're obligated to basically support the highest and best use to benefit the trustees, which is the school foundation program. And so here's where we highly encourage it gets into working with those state land grazing as a compatible use. So under subsection 1 up there, we can, on part of the range, incorporate grazing into that component. If we come back and there's a local proponent that wants to propose the use of state lands, it's a little bit of a process, but the state land board can actually go in there and say, look, if this derives a higher rate of revenue for the school foundation program through a commercial lease, and that's what that commercial lease, special use lease contact is in there. They'll walk these proponents and say, okay, you want to propose this particular state land parcel? It's going to fall under our commercial leasing program. You'll have to incorporate that into your budget. How much is it going to cost to lease these lands from the state of Wyoming? And have you worked with the permittee to incorporate some type of grazing? At the end of the day, that decision will reside with the office or with the state land board. And they will have to go through that process. If they come out and they say, we want to use this over the objections of the grazing leasee, that will then go to the state land board. What we would hope that they would be able to work with those leasees and do any potential grazing modifications to those state lands, which is going to include fencing, water, season of use, timing of use, how can it be used? What's the potential reduction of those state grazing animal use stays out there, AUMs? All those things would be negotiated. And then part of their proposal, if they could come to an agreement with the leasee, it very well may be that additional fencing and water development is something that's part of the cost associated with developing those lands for this state shooting complex. But at the ultimate end of the day, it would, if you get into an adversarial relationship with the local community and an existing grazing leasee, it will be a decision of the state land board. Does that commercial lease generate significantly higher revenues than the grazing leasee? And so hopefully we don't get to a conflict situation like that these things can be resolved, but it'll slow the process down. But that there is a path forward in that scenario. Certainly would come in our consideration as a task force as a recommendation if you got a conflicting situation here and another one over here that's a clear path forward, all other things being equal, that's going to fall out. I think it comes back to that ranking system. But does that help with this scenario here, Aaron? Do you think it's clear enough for those folks in this RMP? That's the process you need to follow.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think that contact is very helpful. I think that'll resolve a lot of that.
Okay, it's almost 10:30. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So let's keep moving down, scroll down a little bit, Karen. Is there anything further on the land acquisition?
So I know, and I see Director Nesvik was on here. I don't know if he's on here. I didn't see a comment that I think he had submitted, but someplace in here, we probably need to add, someplace in here, we need to add the language that the local proponent should consult with the, and I don't know if we want to go the regional office of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department for any adverse impacts associated to wildlife on the proposed locations.
So it is under, I think where we recommended that it be put is in D5. So a
Okay.
little bit further down. And then I've got some specific language that I sent to Karen. I don't know if she's got it in here or not, but I've got it up on my screen. If we need to, I can read it if anybody's interested in what it says.
Okay, before we scroll down to B, is there anything further in A? Hearing nothing, let's scroll down to B, Karen. Parcels, characteristics. Okay. Hey, do you have a comment posted there you want to chime in?
Sure. So I added yesterday the document that our subcommittee worked on with the recommended disciplines to launch with, and then kind of a overall overarching list of disciplines. I don't know if it's easier if LSO shares that, Karen, or if I should take over and share it either way. Think I can share.
Karen, do you have that, or do you want Kate to post it?
Why don't you go ahead and post it, Kate? I think Karen may be temporarily undisposed.
I can't take over for her, looks like. So, oh, there we go. Give me just a second. Not that one. Oh yeah, that one. All right. So basically, after doing some research with our group and asking around some different groups, including a conference call with Nephi from the NSSF, input from USA Archery, some NRL match directors, and a lot from our group. Basically, we came up with 4 core disciplines that we feel should be for phase 1, which would highlight the Western nature of shooting. There are a lot of, what we call square ranges on the East Coast that are well attended, but as we're seeing the growth and as Nephi's group is seeing a lot of growth in what we call dynamic shooting. And so the first is very simple, or not simple, but it's kind of the bread and butter of every range, just a flexible, 50 shooting bays, electric targets with displays for positional and bench rest. That covers a lot of the general shooting competitions. Where it gets a little bit more specific and site specific is 3D archery, as Aaron said. That's a place where not only do I have an interest, but it's all honestly where a lot of the growth is happening. The total archery challenges, the NFAA 3D shoots, they're seeing 2,300 to 3,000 competitors on a weekend event. Even just, Casper's, their shoot as part of the Triple Crown are getting 300 people per event just about every weekend that they host. There's some definitions there of ranges, what it takes, and then elsewhere in the document, there's links to these organizations that have kind of site requirements for these disciplines. The next one is high terrain rifle. This would be the NRL match, National Rifle League hunter style matches where you move between shooting stations. So, versus static, which is a bench rest where you're sitting in one place, and shooting at various distances from one location. You're actually moving between shooting stations, shooting down this canyon, up this draw. I think if anyone, for those that went to Cameo, you saw, some of that facility there on the hillside. And then in the shotgun area, same thing, they have multiple disciplines, 5-stand, trap, skeet, but sporting clays is really where the growth is and where the interest, especially in the West, is it simulates more hunting style, lifestyle style shooting. And it's also dynamic where you move through multiple positions. It also requires a lot of terrain and natural stops, so you don't have to move a ton of dirt around to make that work. So and then below there is all the rules and distances for those things. The other items, the long range, the indoor, couple of benefits on those is a lot of let's take the indoor aside, but like trap and skeet don't take up much room or much infrastructure. The throwers are really your biggest expense there. Long range, little bit more space requirement, but not a lot of infrastructure requirement. Then the flex bays kind of make up the general everyday use of a lot of the ranges. And that's one of the places where Cameo said they built, I think they said 25, and they could have triple that much if they, with the use it gets. So our recommendation was to focus on those 4 dynamic, or the 3 dynamics, and then the standard modern technology flex shooting ranges for the outset and what those requirements are.
Do you see
Cover
this
that
as
well enough?
Is this phase 1? Is this what you expected?
Yep.
You would think you'd want to have on facility at phase 1, day 1?
Yes.
So I think the way we
Not in
want to
there.
have this, Mr. Co-Chair, would be to list it like we have in the RFP, and then just put this as an appendix for further information. And just take this document and put, for the initial phase, we've got that up in the RMP. And if they want more specific information, we would put this in the appendix to the RFP, that they could go look at this.
Yeah, that was our recommendation as well. So we don't have to find a way to shoehorn all this into the RFP.
Yeah.
All right. Other comments?
Mr. Chairman, Kate, I just have a question. Was I reading that right, that you were talking about 50 long-range shooting bays? When we toured Cameo, they had 8. So I was just curious why that 50 number seemed high to me.
Judy.
Okay.
We're talking about pistol bays here.
Long range.
Long range, the range that the CMP is looking at building, they're looking at having 5 firing points.
This is the cross the course technology
okay.
range, flexibility range.
50 firing points. And I come from an electronic target background where we have 200, 300, and 600 yard ranges that you can shoot on simultaneously. Most matches you are going to fill those 50 firing points easily, and you're going to have multiple relays keeping them going. Can I be more specific, Dave?
No, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Legursky, I just maybe misread it, because I looked under 2, it says long range, and then it says 50 bays. So I was just, maybe I'm a little confused on what.
No, that's a typo error on our part. I had from our notes up to 25, but
okay,
50 made it into the document for some reason.
So Kate, you had some introductory language there about the subcommittee and so forth. If you would edit that so it looks like exactly what you would want the appendix to look like, and then forward that as with the heading of design appendix, and send that to Karen.
Okay, we can do that.
All right, back to the RFP. And also, Kate, the blue language there, and if you would send the corrected edit so that that matches up with your appendix language.
Yep.
Okay. On 3, maps. 4, proximity. Glenn, Dave, you had a comment on this area? I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. James Schoon had thrown in, would we want to change this to commercial airports rather than just in-state? And it seems to me that I agreed with him on that. It seems like we just want to know how many people we can get in and get out.
Yeah, I think we just want to, like, instead of in-state airports, just put commercial airports. I agree with that.
Okay. Karen, do you have that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Moving down to C, layout. So, and the reason I added that, a map illustrating how the, kind of nothing engineering here, but can you literally fit all of the desired components on this piece of ground? Some of the proposals already had graphic illustrations of how everything would fit on their piece of ground. I'm comfortable not having that, but like I said, I don't want to create a conflict between doing design at this phase or not. But if somebody's describing or offering a piece of ground, and our view is, I'm not sure how you could possibly fit everything in there. How do you reconcile that? But anyway, I'm good either way if you want to take that language out or not.
Can we change that from map to sketch, which I think by its very nature makes it a very informal general thing versus a very highly planned thing?
Okay, so we
Then I'm okay including it with that.
strike map and insert the word sketch, illustrating how.
How about just conceptual layout?
Yeah. Concept drawing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Concept drawing, conceptual layout.
just a conceptual layout illustrating how the initial desired shooting disciplines. I think we need to put initial, knowing that this is the first phase. Desired shooting disciplines might be accommodated within the site.
Sharon, do you have that?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's scroll down. Anything further? The buffer area, I think I inserted that blue language on buffers, because I guess some of us were talking about buffers in terms of sound and noise, and my thought was encroaching future development. Aaron, your hands up. You're on mute. Aaron, you're on mute.
Sorry, my click didn't click. The 2,000 yards feels like it might be a burdensome requirement. I feel like some of the discussions we had in our shooting disciplines meeting that 1,500 could be considered a minimum, with further distances obviously a plus. Maybe we should lower that bar just a little bit to 1,500.
We threw
Thoughts on lowering?
1760 in our document just as that's the 1 mile, kind of the magic 1 mile thing.
I'm not seeing that on this page. Is that up above? Did we scroll
Yeah.
too far? You scroll back up a little bit, Karen. Okay. So what's your thought? 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 Pepper, or Representative Ottman? You have your hand up?
Yes, Mr. Co-Chairman, thank you. With this 2,000 or 1,500, I will go along with what you all decide, but What I wanted to ask was, or say, according to some of the things I read, the noise buffer was extremely, extremely important to the success of this, because it is what will create public outcry if it's going to be that, especially with competitions the size of what we're proposing to have and will have. So I don't know if that fits right in here, as you were saying a minute ago, or not, but I'd like to have that part of the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about wind separately. Let's talk about the distance here. Do we need 2,000 or 1,500 here?
Mr. Chairman,
John?
I think if we're setting this out, people are going to feel that this number is a threshold number of minimum requirement. A 2,000-yard distance is a lot of the time hard to achieve with good line of sight and good layout. I would propose that we say at least 1,500 yards, with other shooting disciplines and competitions and et cetera being considered a plus. That way we don't create some type of a situation where this facility might be awesome for everything and just not quite able to get a 2,000-yard range, but maybe they can get 1,500 yards, and there's no competitive or recreational requirement for that additional 500 yards. Then the competitive requirement is, according to Nephi, is less than 1,500 yards, and then you step up to like a king of 2 miles, which is 3,500 yards, which is a whole different class of range and functionality. So I would propose 1,500 serves as our threshold to get past, and then more is obviously could be considered a benefit.
Okay. So Karen, can we put at least 1,500 yards on number one?
Yes, sir. I'll say that the site must have at least 1,500 yards line of sight with the buffer on both ends.
That work for everybody? All right. Now we can scroll down. Number two, quarter-mile buffer. And then, like I said, I put the blue language there. I just think about the range in St. George that had development built up around it, and then they had to reverse the range and shoot the other direction because of the development. Cost a ton of money. So I don't know if this language is perfect, but the buffer area beyond the site that we don't control, right, where somebody might build a subdivision, has to be accounted for, so we don't have a future encroachment.
Yeah, at one point in time, we had some language in there about zoning, and I'm trying to find that where it is. And I just think that's important. If this is buttoned up against private property, my concern is a little bit is if you do one of these and you're up against private property and you don't zone it, and then somebody wants to come in and do a commercial or a residential development, they're going to say, you've taken my property rights away from me because nobody will buy this. So you've devalued my property. And so I think we almost have to have it's either can't be developed within a certain buffer distance, but I don't know what those numbers, what that distance look like. To your point, I think that's a valid concern that you could very well have an adjacent private landowner come in there and make the case that somehow they've suffered damage associated with this activity without the zoning regulations in place. Obviously, if it's federal or state land, that's a non-issue. You're not going to probably end up with residential development.
Judy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, a couple of things, Mr. Chairman. Alabama has a law which prohibits adjacent landowners from suing ranges. And that law specifically saved our range at one point from a group of people who thought that the noise was bothering them. And so it might be something we might look at down the road, looking at something in Wyoming to protect our ranges. The other thing is about encroachment. in my years of working with the military, there's just no answer to that. It doesn't make any difference whether you're Fort Carson or Fort Leonard Wood. People keep growing up next to you and they keep complaining. And eventually we're going to deal with that. So the important thing is that we make sure that our buffers and our shooting fans and everything are more than adequate so that we are not endangering anyone who chooses to build next to our land. But there's no way we're going to stop people from moving close to it, because once you have something attractive, people are going to want to build there. And it's happening all over the country, and it happens regularly.
So do you think we need to take that language out that's in blue?
No, absolutely not. I think it's really important to be there. It's just that it's not going to work magic.
Brian?
Yeah, the other thing I'm assuming here, and I'm like Judy, I've had experience with this one with when there's a federal nexus, but I assume there's got to be some kind of a surface danger zone that's calculated, and that's not something we can determine. It's a specific calculation based on the terrain and the potential maximum caliber of weapon that would be fired on the range. And so I think that maybe even putting something in here that says that includes a buffer that would be sufficient to cover any later determined surface danger zone or later determined buffer area required for safety purposes. Something to that effect might be good for us to put in here so that folks realize there's going to be some other safety requirements that we really can't determine until the site's selected and analyzed.
Yeah, because that's something that, when, as the range is developed, the engineers will tell us that, you can't shoot a 50 caliber on this particular range because you don't have an adequate drop zone or something.
Yeah, I think what they would tell you is that you could shoot a 50 caliber here, but based on this terrain and based on the trajectory, you need to have a surface danger zone that's not occupied by human beings or houses or, at this distance, and they would actually map it. And that actually, based on the terrain and the way the range is set up, can actually be a fairly short. It doesn't have to be huge, but if it's, super flat terrain, it could be quite a ways.
Do you think
Buffer isn't all about distance, it's also about terrain.
Okay. So do we need to change the verbiage there, or?
I think it's adequate the way it is. It's basically just a heads up and pay attention.
Dave, you had your hands up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking, if we can scroll up to number 1, maybe I missed it, but we talk about a minimum of 100 yards from an adjacent property. I wonder if we just want to take that piece out and just leave what you have written in there. I like what you've written.
So this, that would then read, line of sight distance of at least 1,500 yards with a buffer at both ends, period.
Something to that effect, yes. Something, maybe the same language that you wrote below. I don't know, but I don't think we want to say a minimum of 100 yards. It seems like it may need to be much further.
Yeah, and if you've got a cliff face, you may not need 100 yards, right?
Right.
So, Karen, let's just put a period with the buffer on both ends, period, on number 1, and then we'll talk about other stuff on number 2. Brian, your hand's still up. You have further comment?
No, I think that works, but I do think that, that's going to be a moving number based on the site selection, that it's pretty impossible for us to put it in an RFP, what that distance needs to be.
Okay.
Instead of stating a distance, why not just have an adequate buffer?
Or just, what I think it would read if we tried that is just say buffer at both ends, period.
Yeah, I just mean at number 2, parcels
Oh,
should
number 2?
an adequate buffer between any range.
Strike the quarter mile language and go adequate buffer.
That would be my suggestion. Because I think site's going to drive that, as Brian said.
Any concerns with that? So Karen, on number 2, we're gonna say, and should have an adequate buffer between any range on the complex and other buildings.
That's noted.
Number 3. Number 4. All right. Going down to D, site characteristics.
So I think Brian had an addition. Is this where you wanted to add, Director Nesbitt, an item number 5?
Yeah, it is, Senator, and so I don't see it here. It could actually be even number 7, but this is what it would say. And do you still have this language, Karen?
No, I do not.
Okay, so it would say, a number 7 would be wildlife impacts. Applicants should identify, or we should probably say shall. Applicants shall identify important fish and wildlife habitats that would be impacted by the site development and facility operation, and provide how they plan to avoid, minimize, and or mitigate for those impacts. And then a parens that says Wyoming Game and Fish Department can assist with this. And I could actually even put that into the chat probably. Maybe I can figure that out. That helps you out, Karen.
Actually, Director, if you want to just email me that language.
Okay, I will do that. Does anybody have issues with what I read, or do I need to read it again?
I think it's fine. Mr. Co-Chairman, could you take over for just a minute? I need to step away from the computer for just a minute.
We can do that. So now, if we've got, anybody have any additional questions for Director Nesbitt as far as those components of adding those in there with the identification and the consultation? If not, let's go on to site characteristics. Cade, you had a comment here?
Yeah, Karen, can you hover over that so I can read the whole thing on my comment? I felt like we were getting overly specific, and it could be like to Ron's question there about the banquet hall being required. I just thought we could simplify that and say something to the tune of what I wrote there.
Yeah, I'm fine with that language. Anybody else? So, Karen, if you just incorporate Cade's language there under number 1.
Yes, sir.
All right. If you can scroll back over. I guess, Ron, you had a comment there too.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chair, I think Kate addressed that. I was just looking for clarification, but I like the language he came up with.
All right. So we can scroll back over, Karen. Any discussions on item 2, 3, shooting bays, land allocation, high degree of topographic relief, vegetation, any comments? Site orientation. Here's the zoning component that gets back to some of the buffers we talked about above. I'm just going to keep going through this. Next one, if I don't see any hands raised or anybody says utilities. I'm going to scroll down, Karen. Governance structure. Let's go through this to the extent identifiable. So one of the things that I wanted to do here, Karen, you had done a very good job of putting together one of our first meetings, all the potential proposed types of governance.
Yes,
And
sir.
so I just wanted to include this as either an exhibit or an addendum. So I don't remember what we called that. But if you could just see where it says see exhibit, whatever we're going to call that 2, or a list of possibilities.
Okay, I'll make sure that that gets added as an additional attachment.
Okay.
And then we would delete that last sentence of proposal could range from, because it'd be listed in the possibilities. Is that correct?
Yeah, we could. Okay, we are on operational support. Co-Chair Wassett, you want to take back over this?
I've got it. All right. Operational support. Applicants shall indicate. And then an example. Do we need the example in there or not?
I think it helps them lead, but it's whatever the group thinks.
Any comment? Any
Well, I
up or
think we should
down on
keep it.
keeping that language? The
I think
example?
Senator Kolb here, I think we should keep it in there because I think it's descriptive and what the intent is we're looking for. So I think it helps.
Okay. I just lost my view of the document.
That was my doing. I thought you might have a more robust conversation.
Okay. All right. So that takes us down to contributions. I think we can strike that first partial sentence of cash, in-kind donations, other contributions, take that out. So it's a contributions, proposals with significant.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. Anything further under contributions? One and two. Scroll down to number 3. Salaries, benefits, utilities, routine maintenance, major maintenance. Anything at all there on 3? All right, scroll down to 4, tourism and marketing. This is where we put all the work on tourism, right?
Yep.
Dave, you had a comment here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not wed to it. I just felt in order to compare apples to apples, is it worth just saying, sorry, I got to pull up my comment. For example, number of restaurants within X number of miles. Right here, we do say that number of restaurants, travel time, and other things. Just when we're comparing, I just wondered if it would be easier for us when we're ranking these things.
What number of miles seems reasonable here? Would we say 5 miles, 3 miles, What do you think is reasonable here?
Mr. Chairman, if you're asking me, I would say 20 or 30 miles. But I would defer to the group.
We've been in another state at 30 miles to some of these proposals.
Yeah, at least two.
Mr. Chairman, 10 miles away is probably the equivalent of a 20 to 30-minute commute. 30 minutes out and 30 minutes back, that'd be an hour potentially out of a day, or maybe, a half hour to go in. I don't know. That seems like 10 miles could be a good radius.
I agree with Dave, Mr. Co-Chairman. I go 15 miles one way to the grocery store. So, I mean, it depends on where it is and the location. Also, you can drive 70 miles an hour. So, I mean, I would think 20 miles would be reasonable, but that's just my thought. Thank you.
My only thought is, I don't know how these matches work, but if you have a brief amount of time for lunch, if it's half an hour out and half an hour back, that's a big chunk of time out of the middle of your shooting day.
If I could add to that, I've been at restaurants where you can get there in 5 minutes and then you wait in line for 30 minutes to get a table. So there's lots of considerations there.
Yeah.
So I had reached out to some match directors for what they look for when they're running matches. And what I got back is their goal is to keep drive time from the hotel to the range under 40 minutes. They'll occasionally go up to 60 if it's a great location, but 20 is always the target and they measure in minutes, not in miles, because it's different.
So for comparative purposes, there may be more, but if we say how many are within 20 minutes of the site? Or 40 minutes, what's your pleasure? I'd say 20 minutes, but what's the committee's thought?
20 sounds good.
Yeah, like 20.
So Karen, let's put within 20 minutes of the site.
And Mr. Chairman, I would throw out restaurants, camping, all those things that we have in there, hotels. It seems like we could just put all that 20 minutes throughout across.
Amenities within 20 minutes.
So on each of these where we talk about restaurants and then hotel rooms, that each of those will be broke down by 20 minutes. You got that, Karen?
Yes, sir. I'll make an overarching statement that is the proximity you're looking at.
Okay. Anything further under tourism and marketing?
Grammar on C needs to be cleaned up a little bit. When you take out the or not, then the sentence doesn't make sense, but
Whether your plan anticipates construction of lodging facilities for competitors on site. How about take weather out and just put if
yes.
Your plan anticipates?
Yes, sir. There's a lot of grammatical corrections that need to be made in the document, and I will definitely do that once you have satisfied on content.
Very good. All right, anything under D? Destination Marketing Association? All right, that takes us to economic development.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chair, and ask a few similar questions to the tourism section, but basically it's getting again at this collaborative effort and plan, whether you want to call it economic development or business plan, but is there an organization, like has been mentioned earlier, some communities have an economic development organization, some do it through other means. If you have an economic development plan, item 3, this is kind of where we get into the unknown, but the potential for growth. And I do believe that is organic, but there are resources and collaborative efforts with the business folks for infrastructure development or what have you, trade show opportunities, things like that for products. So just do you have a collaborative effort to respond to opportunities to leverage the complex for current or future economic growth? This could be related to tourism, outdoor recreation industry, business expansion, recruitment. A lot of talk today about the workforce availability and development. And then 4, and again, I think we've talked a bit about the governance and the sources of funding for O&M and operation of the complex. But beyond that, what are the opportunities for availability of possible future growth in phase 2 or 3? So if this is more of, do you have the group together you need to be prepared to respond and investigate opportunities?
Well said. And I just, remind everybody that in our preamble, we said that economic development is our primary objective here, right? We're going to have a great shooting time, but more importantly, this whole effort is about economic development. Any changes, any suggestions for economic development under Romanet 5? All right, Romanet 6, operation and maintenance.
Mr. Co-Chair, I would just say, I like Cade's point. I think, again, I put this in there from our Business Ready Community Grant Loan Program. I don't think everything needs to be in there, but I also am wondering now if this is more of a phase 2 of the process when we have more understanding of what's actually going to be at the complex facility, and just make sure after the RFP and the initial maybe presentations from the communities and start winnowing down the remaining applicants, that becomes more of a factor. But just something, there are a lot of things in this RFP to make sure people are thinking about all the elements that go into hosting this site. So I don't necessarily believe it should be in the initial RFP. Maybe it's more to Kate's point that it is exhaustive, and when we know more, we can winnow it down and then work with the finalists.
And I had to step out during the governance portion of the conversation, mostly because of the 3 cups of coffee earlier this morning. But I think in there, the governance should include the plan for upkeep and maintenance management. I don't think we need to get into the minutia of what it is, but if it's not in the business plan and governance, it should be, because that's part of the longevity of the relationship.
All right, Karen, can we scroll back up? We have operational support.
I think under that, it seems to me, and I agree with Cade that under this operational support, maybe the next thing we need to just put in here is this as part of this governance structure, please provide information on the proposed operation and maintenance of
And it's
the.
actually right there in that B right now, if you see their
It is.
co-chair,
Yeah,
you know, staff and funding for the daily operation and ongoing maintenance, I think covers that they should.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
This
think
is
that's
talked about. Go ahead.
I think that's adequate for this first go round.
Yeah, well,
Mr. Chairman, it is, if you scroll down a little bit more, there is something in there about routine maintenance on 3A3. So one more little scroll there, Karen.
financial responsibility for.
And
Yeah,
it does talk about routine maintenance and major
Yeah, I
maintenance,
think
facility
good.
replacement.
Good catch, Dave. I think we got it. All right,
Yes, I
let's
think
scroll
we can
down
take
to
it
the
out of-
tourism plan.
Yep.
Keep scrolling down. I think we covered that. Economic development, operation maintenance. So we're going to strike all of 6. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's incorporated in those 2 lines above.
yeah.
Okay, so Karen will strike all of 6. 7, supporting information. So who added section C there, and maybe explain what that's all about?
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, I talked with our investments team, Business Ready Communities program, person specifically involved with that program. I don't know if that's necessary. Maybe LSO legally knows more about that, but that is tied to the grant and loan program contracts. It's just it doesn't say that. So I don't know where we're going at with the design, the construction, but it does apply the procurement standards and preference act with the opportunity for Wyoming companies to bid on these. That doesn't say they have to be chosen, especially in areas of high industry expertise. But I didn't know if that needed to be in there or not. Maybe LSO knows better.
Thoughts? Task force?
My thought is that's the next phase. Once we select the site, make a recommendation, and start working with as far as site design, build out. Who's gonna that we bring in that component? We obviously want to give state contractors in-state preference. What's your thoughts, Ron? Do we bring that in the second phase or not?
Yeah, again, I think kind of with the O&M massive language I threw in there. I think this is probably a second phase when we
It
start.
is probably worth mentioning the land acquisition rules, though. If state money is used to buy the property, what that reference is.
I don't know that it hurts anything to have that in there right now. Does that, I don't know if you were an applicant or a proposal group, would that confuse you, or would that be helpful to have that stated up front? Does it hurt anything to have it in there?
No, it's just an acknowledgement.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt anything. It adds it's fine one way or the other.
Okay. Maybe after the last, throughout the project, when applicable. Maybe add that word, when applicable.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that it? Is that the end of the RFP here? Scroll down any further?
Mr. Chairman, just as a recap, the summary of the important dates, I will be including April 15th for the metric, April 22nd for the first Q&A, and May 15th for the second Q&A. The important dates actually does indicate August 19th to the 23rd, LSO will draft the letter, and during your conversations today, you said that would be no later than September 15th, 16th.
So do we need to change something or?
No, I'm just letting you know that these are the things that are going to be added to this document
Stateless?
based on conversations today.
Good, good. So what all did we dump on tourism? Are we done there? Can we add some more?
I think that was actually on Aaron's ranking system, wasn't it, or was it not?
Yeah, those were the dates on the rankings. And then the feedback question that applicants might have. The only thing I'd mention here, Karen, is I think in various places we refer to the applying community or the proposal community with different titles.
Mhm.
Maybe at the very outset of this, we describe them with one title, applicant or whatever title we want to use, and then make sure that we're consistent with that title throughout the document.
Absolutely. I will go ahead and standardize that so that we're referring to an applicant and a proposal. And I'll also include information on who that contact person is. So when you get to the point of needing to get additional information or reach out, there's a single point of contact.
Yeah, and I'd be fine if that was like an LSO email address of some sort. And just have them send all their questions there, and then you can disperse those to the co-chairman and I, and we can, or what do you think, Ms. Co-chair? You want it on the SharePoint? You want it someplace more visible, or?
I think put it on the SharePoint so everybody has access to it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, what I will go ahead and do is the email address that we used for the letters of intent, we'll go ahead and keep that email active so that any inquirers can go ahead and put their Q&A there. And then I'll compile them into a document for the SharePoint. And then once you have approved that document, the responses to that, I'll go ahead and post that back publicly so we can see all the questions that have been asked and answered.
Okay. Well, what do you think, task force? Any closing? And did we overlook anything? Any 30,000 feet discussion on this document? Nish, you've been awfully quiet today.
Mr. Chair, that's because Brian was here for most of it, but I knew Director Nesbitt had to slip out. And so I didn't want to be late and then not know what we're talking about, but I also didn't want to overstep. So
Very good. Anyone else? Any closing comments? Are we happy with this RFP or is it good to go? We get a few edits going. Do you think it's going to get us where we need to be?
I think it's amazingly good, and it was a good meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to thank Karen for all of her work and the people that we're talking about, the shooting range disciplines, and Aaron, your work on the ranking. Thank you all for taking that extra time to do that.
Yeah, I really appreciated the overview of the scoring. I think that was very good use of our time this morning. Thank you, Aaron.
I'll send that out for everybody to a final look of suggestions or whatever. So, Mr. Chairman, that'll be forthcoming.
Good. And I think it was maybe the co-chairman's idea to have different representatives on this body, but I think the governor made some really great selections for who was on this task force, and I'm very thankful for the voices and the wisdom of the folks who've been chiming in and making this process work for us. And I was a little nervous. You try and do anything with a committee of 12 people, it can get kind of ugly, but this group has worked well together, and I just want to say thank you. I very much appreciate your effort. Mr. Co-Chairman, some closing comments?
No, let's get this thing rolled out, and then we got a lot of work ahead of us, ladies and gentlemen, over the next 4 months. And I hope this comes to fruition, and it's something that a few years from now, maybe we can have a little reunion and a ribbon cutting ceremony at some location here in Wyoming to celebrate our success. So stay tuned. We got a lot of work this summer.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone.